Okay, this presentation just came from several decades of my belonging to different theosophical groups of different ways of doing things and participating in different study classes and lodges and stuff, and seeing how many different ways people thought of theosophy and how it works in the world and how a theosophical organization is set up, and how many different views you get from going to different places. And just wondering how, well, we have the big questions of what is theosophy and where does it fit in my life and in the world, and do I really know what I think I know? And that also ties to the the Zen idea of beginner's mind, of thinking through things freshly each time, which we stop doing as soon as we become too settled in a single way of looking at things and not thinking through things freshly each time. So I started thinking of the different ways that theosophical organizations are set up and that different people believe and think that the whole thing is working. And I saw these patterns, and at first I was going to kind of formulate some example patterns and say these are the types of things they are. And then I thought I better back up a little bit and just give examples of how these patterns show up in everyday life and different things, and give all the raw information as things to think about, and then at the end see what comments people have and how it might fit the theosophical things. And some of the things we heard earlier today, when Jim was mentioning about the cognitive behavioral therapy, how you have automatic thoughts and underlying assumptions and core beliefs, that there's different levels of assumptions that we carry with about how we think theosophy is and how it works in the world and how it works in our organization and our lodges and our lives. And so that kind of ties in, as well as the comment about egocentric vision of the world, that we do have an egocentric vision of the world, but how do we separate ourselves from that vision a little bit to get a bit of perspective on our lives? And how do we become self-aware that we're seeing things through that sort of filter and not seeing things directly as they are? So first I mentioned that some comments on theosophical organizations, that in the broad picture they've existed throughout the world in many forms, and the current era of theosophical activity in the West started with Blavatsky, and then various specialized theosophical organizations branched off with that, and many New Age and semi-theosophical or hard to tell that they belong to Theosophy at one point organizations. So we have Point Loma as one example of one of the ways that Theosophy branched out since Blavatsky's time, and they emphasize things like the arts in Southern California at the time, and had the first Greek temple this part of the country, and a full educational system from grade school through university level. And that was organized one way. And then another direction was with the United Lodge of Theosophists, and this is the LA Lodge. And that took a different slant than Catherine Tingley's slant. And there's a different way that it operates. And when we look at all the different assumptions and different things that you consider in theosophical organizations, you'll see, if you're familiar with both organizations, some things that show up in one and some that show up in another. And really, if you aren't aware of these things going on, then you're not self-aware of what's happening, and you lose a sense of objectivity and a sense of ability to choose for or against or pick and choose if you're not aware that things are going on. And this is the Adyar headquarters in Adyar, Madras, India, and it occupies a huge chunk of the city. And this is from Google Maps, just showing where the Adyar site is. And I think I heard someone say a few years ago that it was worth billions of dollars, the land. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it's incredibly valuable real estate. And there's the famous banyan tree at Adyar, or a bit of it, and one of the buildings at Adyar. So we have these different theosophical groups that branch off, and then we have different symbols of the society. For instance, it also shows a sense of branching, like we have the original with the swastika in it, and a more modernized one where the swastika is sort of obscured because swastikas are supposed to be bad and associated with Nazis now, and has a negative connotation, so people kind of round the corners a little bit so that it's not obvious that it's swastika. Or you have a seal of an esoteric group, or another thing that I kind of had fun with a few years ago was the idea of a theosophical seal with a Mandelbrot set instead of a swastika, because the Mandelbrot set is a new symbol that comes from mathematics that kind of shows the nature of existence, what can exist as opposed to what can exist. And in a way that kind of is similar to the wheel of time, but that's just kind of a fun experimentation on it. It's not associated with any theosophical organization or anything. And then we have key individuals in the theosophical movement. And the first generation were the people that did the initial impetus, and everyone was all together then. And later on, there were rifts and specializations going off in different directions. And in one sense, people say that's bad because all the organizations are no longer cooperating, and at least for a long period of time. In another sense, because they're specialized and they're different and have their different personalities, and they have an appeal to different people of different temperaments, and each could do good to some people in their own unique ways. But you have like the two of the main founders of the modern theosophical movement, Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott. And Judge was the third person who stayed behind in the United States when they went off to India to build up Theosophy in the rest of the world. And Blavatsky's teachers, which these are from paintings of them that were told the inspiration for Blavatsky's work. That they wanted this sort of thing as a project in the Western world at a time when all their colleagues didn't go ahead, didn't like the idea. And then on the Point Loma side, you have Catherine Tingley and J.D. Peruker as two of the key individuals that kind of struck the keynote for the personality of work that took that path. And Robert Crosby for the ULT direction. And then Annie Besant had a strong influence on the Adyar direction and was also instrumental in founding lots of universities and in other like social work in India. And then Krishnamurti, although you may not think of him as doing theosophical work, in a way he was yet another branching. In a way that some of the things that he taught almost seem like a 180-degree turn on what he was brought up with, where instead of being a society with a hierarchy where he is the coming Christ, he goes around teaching no societies and total independence of thought. So in a way, he's specialized to fill yet another philosophical need. And then Leadbeater's work in the Adyar direction, that he was operating on the model of sort of the psychical scientific investigator, and it's another issue about the reliability of what he said he came up with, but his model was basically that you, if you were trained, you could go into other worlds and you could explore it in the same way that like scientists in the 1800s and 1900s would go explore the flora and fauna and do scientific studies of unexplored places of the physical world. And Alice Bailey was like a further offshoot in a way that incorporated a lot of Leadbeater's materials, but then it gets wider and wider, diverging from the original impulse. And in a way you could say that the Dalai Lama's work continues the same thing of connecting connecting people to the path and to the idea of compassion and connectedness to people, and making deep philosophical ideas and important as being grounded in your life. Although humor is also important. So I thought I'd bring that up, and I'll sprinkle a little humor in at different times too, because if you're always taking yourself seriously and you can never laugh at things, that's a sign of a fanatic. And you got to watch out for someone who could never laugh. Although humor can be used, so can anything else. So it's not humor's fault. So there's advantages to humor, and humor plays a role in any group, even Theosophical. And we can stretch our minds a little bit with humor. We don't have to necessarily be 100% realistic. And it's a way of breaking ice and promoting brotherhood. And you have a thing in Toastmasters called an icebreaker. And in groups, if you get people laughing at the start, then they warm up to the presentation more. And then here's some random Theosophical humor that you'll have to forgive me if my sense of humor isn't up to everyone else's standards, but it's an attempt at humor anyway. So, okay, well, impersonality, eagerness to push opinions on others anonymously. Guru, someone who hints at deep wisdom but never says anything wise. Maybe they can't, but they hint. Student, one who prefers books by dead people over being active in real life. Or you can find it in things that don't have to do with people at all, like mathematical humor. And humor, in a way, also grounds us to life and connects us to things. And it can be a teaching method, too, and you can find it even among great teachers. So one of many different models that you can find in Theosophical or in any organization or activity is the educational model. And you find it in trying to explain the deeper philosophical truths that you might say, well, we're in life to learn lessons. We master a grade, we move on to the next one. But then, why are we learning the lessons? Who made the lesson plan? Why do we have to do, or what do we do with what we learned? And then is there more than life than just going through one level of school after the other? So education as a model explains some things, but it leaves other things unexplained, and it's only partial. But anything you use as an analogy is only partial. It describes one facet of things, but it doesn't give you the complete picture. So you find a lot of models used in explaining Theosophy and also used in describing Theosophical groups, and one of them is educational. So you say, if we really study hard at our Theosophy or at our whatever, we'll graduate and earn our diploma and we'll be a master or whatever. And we get extra points in our organization if we're attentive when we raise our hand and we show what we've learned. And we're best bunched together with students of a compatible background, the people that are way advanced or way behind us. The discussions or activities go to the least common denominator, and the more advanced people are either practicing being teachers or being frustrated and not able to learn anything. So grouping people together is helpful in an educational model. And then models tend to get complicated the more that you organize them into different levels and degrees and stages and stuff, just like an educational system. You get a lot of levels to it. Another type of model that you see in different areas of life and organizations is it like a mystery school? Is this like one of the ancient mysteries? We go and learn and we train in things that are too advanced for the general public. And do we hear things that we swear to secrecy, but things that we apply in our life? And do some of us stay in the temples to teach other upcoming monks or students while the rest of us go out in the world to do good works? So there's the mystery school model of how things might work, including Theosophical groups. And we look around the world, and there's ruins of things that might have been a mystery school, And there's other things that might seem impressive in the architecture, but if that may or may not have been mysteries happening there. It might have just been human sacrifices. You don't know by the architecture. You have to know some history too. And over the ages, the mysteries have been depicted differently with different symbols and different art and architecture and ways of presenting them at different times. So what works in one culture might or might not work in this culture. Another type of model is kind of the true believers model, like the born again in some like religious sects, that is basically saying this stuff is too high for us to understand, so we accept stuff on faith. And one thing that typically comes with that is that ours is the one true way, and the rival beliefs we've got to discredit because they also have an appeal to faith in something else, and that our reward doesn't come because of good deeds. It becomes we profess our belief in the right group. So like we vote Democrat versus Republican or whatever, and we're the right voters. And obviously we're good because we've aligned ourselves with the right belief. So with the true believer model, it's a profession of belief and accepting being a membership in a sort of a package thing that defines. So we might picture higher beings watching over us and taking care of us, and that's what our belief is based in. Or we might attend groups of believers where someone says that they have a special inspiration and everyone flocks around them and is hoping one day to be touched like they are. And it could be someone says that God's speaking to them, or it could be someone that says, they kind of hint all over the place, the master's talking through me. You hang around me, maybe one day they'll talk to you too, or I've got this letter at home that I got by a special post. So this is all part of this model or this way of looking at it. And I should say I'm mentioning all these models so that we can see what's working in different situations that we go in, and we can try to understand them and try to be aware of things so that we don't go into them unaware and So we maintain some self-awareness. So for the true believer, the facts in everyday life situation don't get in the way of beliefs. But according to Zen, it doesn't really matter if you what you believe. You're still what you are. But do you know what you are, is the question. And then another is a hierarchy, a picture of a chain of command, like everyone has a spiritual boss and there's people that work for them, and it's like working for a company where you have your manager and you have your subordinates, and all authority is delegated from higher to lower, and rival organizations could be allies or they could be opponents to our organization, and our free will comes between the parameters of work assigned to us by our bosses, and the orders are given and one is not self-directed. But that reminds me of one thing they said, or was said in the Mahatma letters, that they leave the chelas to their own device and counsel up to the last initiation. They don't tell, do this, do that sort of thing. They give problems to solve. They don't, if they told chelas to do specific things, they would be also taking away the merit of having decided and chosen to do that from the follower. But anyway, hierarchy or chain of command is one sort of analogy that can apply in some places, and so it's good to be aware of how it goes. So like you may have a high commander, like in the U.S. military or government, and all sorts of levels of command. And sometimes you see organizations of metaphysical things, like you have all these different classes of angels, and this one reports to this one, reports to this one, and it gets really elaborate. And then for localized things, you have a local chain of command of a commanding officer and all that, or where you have a lodge president and the lodge secretary and the different officers. And then it gets more complicated as you have more and more detail filled in. Another model is evolutionary, that greater capacity, intelligence capacity evolves from those of lesser, and that, but in the outer world, you see evolution is often initiated by adaptation to a changing environment where you are, when you're smart and clever, you're able to evolve and change and survive and move ahead. But in the evolutionary model that we usually hear about, the pathway of evolution is planned out by greater beings, sort of like a lesson plan in school or something. And the other idea or impression that we get is that the same path of evolution repeats in all worlds throughout the history of the universe, that it's the same sort of a pattern of unrolling or unscrolling. But that may not be in the outward appearance of physical forms, but rather you have certain stages of development, including like you develop mastery of your physical vehicle, and then your passion is in your mind in a certain progressive order. And in this model, we're great beings because we have evolved those capabilities. So we can trace, like looking at physical lineage, there's the lineage of how things branch out from each other, or you might have a model that lesser versions of ourselves transform into newer versions, or in Blavatsky's one, you'd have taller into smaller, like astral and semi-astral giant beings until humanity became physical in the third root way. So the order of progression in pictures might look different, but it's still one of progressing through things. And then another model is the karmic model. And it's more than crime and punishment, it's more than debts or savings. And I would say that there's no one-sided karma. You can only have karma if there's a connection between yourself and another, or yourself and other. And the bond isn't a debt, like a one-sided thing, like you owe money, you pay it back, it's settled. It's a living connection. And that living connection has a certain life to it, and like a comment we heard earlier today, that you could stress out the connection by dumping too much content in it and damage it if you're not careful. But it's because of having a living connection to another being, you can make and you can feel the impact of their karma as you have a back and forth interaction. And if you stop interacting and you let that connection dwindle away, eventually there's no pull between you and the other anymore. And if you totally disconnect from life and you just cultivate good things, eventually you end up as a Pratyeka Buddha and you disappear. But if you develop strong bonds of a need for creative expression and compassion in the world, you're connected to many or all living things, and that ties you into existence so you continue evolving. But for a karmic bond to exist, it's you, I and thou, or you or other, or there's some, there's a living link. It's not a one-sided thing. And Theosophical groups exist to create bonds among peoples in one sense. So with karma, once you set something in motion, it is going to come back to you. You may come from a direction you're not expecting. And it's not an excuse to do bad things. Okay, I'll hang here for one more laugh. And another model is merit and spiritual wealth, that you earn a place in heaven by doing good deeds. And it's like you're getting spiritual points. And but doing something for points is doing it for a selfish motive, not because they're the right thing to do, not because you love doing them. So the merit model kind of falls short in that. And no one else can bail you out for your bad situation in life. You have to bail yourself out by self-change. And you have to watch out for the what's in it for me sort of mentality. So like at death, your heavy heart is weighed against a feather, and if you have any regrets of having not lived a good life, you may be found wanting. And you could burn a lot of candles, but that may or may not help you, even if you get 10 points per candle. Okay, now another page of Theosophical humor. The humor may be in my attempt at humor more than in the humor itself, but Okay, some people may consider their fellows learned if they can quote back to them what they just said to them. And some people consider someone a good student if they're a fan of approved books by recommended authors. And leadership potential may mean one's loyalty to the organizational status quo, not to someone that wants to innovate or change. So gatekeepers are rewarded more than pioneer or innovator types. Okay, so religious ceremonies may bring merit, not because of the ceremony, but if the ceremony as an aid helps you affect internal changes and helps you connect to things, but not more candles. You stop getting points after the first few candles. And there was an article on Google News a while ago how the Pope was offering some indulgences in exchange for following his Twitter account. This was on Google News. This was not on an Onion or a spoof thing. So apparently some places you can buy merit, but I wouldn't say that would apply for a Theosophical model. But we're looking at just examples of how things appear. So maybe we should forget about going for points and just go for the real thing. Find ourselves a Bodhi tree. Okay, another model is diet or self-improvement. There's all sorts of diets of every possible type of thing, including red meat only, or no carbos, or no wheat, or no this or that. But not all might work for you. But if you find one that works and the side effects aren't too bad on you, the important thing is to, if you need to accomplish weight loss, find a diet and do it and succeed. It's not a diet is better than another. And the different Theosophical groups offer approaches to personal advancement and changing the world for the better. And again, what works the best to draw you out to become a better person and most useful in the world for yourself and for others. So you look for nutritious food or content in your Theosophical group or diet. And some groups give you something that is all nicely packaged up, so you don't have to think about it a lot. You just follow the plan, and hopefully it works for you. And other approaches, you kind of write your own list, and you do things on your own, and just say, okay, I'm going to do it, and I'll do one of these and one of those, and sort of self-planned diet approach to reach your goal. Okay, another model has to do with stages of self-transformation or another key idea. Something that shows up in your life might not be something that you newly evolved, and it might not be appearing for the first time. It may be a phase of life thing, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly at a certain phase of life. That transformation isn't a new evolution for the caterpillar. It's a phase of life for the same creature that is both the caterpillar and the butterfly. It just comes out at a certain point. Some things in you are waiting an opportunity to come out, but are already part of you, and other things that you've never experienced before at all for all time, that would be evolution as opposed to just unrolling what is in there. And as you can see, it's quite different, but it's the same creature, and it's just different ages of its lifetime. And you'd be surprised what came out when you first look at the thing that's going into the cocoon. And that leads us to initiation, because initiation is a new beginning, like entering college, whereas adaptship is like graduating, where you have totally mastered something. Initiation is where you have entered onto something and it's new in your life, and you have new capabilities. And in Fundamentals of the Esoteric Philosophy, GDP describes the three minor initiations in a way that I find helpful and in a way can relate to a lot of Theosophical students. And I mentioned a simple version of the ideas here, which is the first minor initiations to come in to contact with a genuine source of the teachings. The second is to be able to have original ideas of your own that go beyond what's on the printed page, so that you're kind of connected inwardly with the source and you have the ability to understand a little more than you've been taught. And the third is to be able to actually teach it or impart some idea to others. Now, these are minor initiations because they're not the big grand thing of the solstices and the equinoxes, but they are minor transformations in one's life, and because they have happened many times before probably, they're more like phase of life things when you're ready for a certain phase of life where this is part of it, like the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, that a new aspect of your life is opening up. The major initiations, though, are like following world news or seeing what's happening in the Olympics. It's not like you're walking around the block. It's like really, really advanced things that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are concerned with, but not the everyday people. So there may be different ceremonies happening at different times of initiation, and initiations in an organization that is kind of lost its interconnection might be more of a ceremony than anything else. And there are, in different societies, and some may have to do with just rites of passage, like going from childhood into adulthood, like being accepted as a full man or woman in society, which is another like major transitional thing. And some might be quiet, spiritual, and reflective, and others might be more mystical in nature, where you're visualizing things but no one else sees them. Or others might not involve seeing other beings at all, but just picturing light or something. But initiations, in one sense, refer to grand things that are way beyond the ken of anything we'll ever see, and in a simpler, more personal sense, are opening up of doorways to all of us in life when we're ready for those particular doorways. So that leads to the sacred seasons with the major initiations, and great things happen and at transitional periods, like at dusk or sunrise, when the day is starting to change, or in mathematics on boundaries, like in fractals or stuff, where all the chaotic things emerge, or at the major astronomical time periods of the year, like the 4 turning points of the year. And at these transitional points, the doors open wider to other realms, and we can sense them. And in the great initiations, some beings may actually go out and experience things and come back changed, and new things may be going in their lives after that. And special planetary alignments may relate to the even greatest of the mysteries that involve the lining up of several planets, and not just the Earth and Sun at a certain time of year. And there may be, for initiations, there may be religious groups that have different practices that they follow, or others may be more like a public festive type thing where everyone's out celebrating in their own way. But again, this is something that affects everyone at their own levels, and you can't tell if the person standing next to you in the crowd is experiencing something vastly deeper than what you're experiencing if you stand there among the crowd. It isn't guaranteed that the highest thing happens when there's just only one person there and no one else is there. But it's a certain special time of year when these doors open. Another type of model is that of movies and entertainment, and you find this with some clubs or organizations or stuff, that people go to meetings or join groups because they want to be entertained, they want something to engage their emotions, they want to socialize, and they may want vicariously to experience things that they can't experience in everyday life, like you see a movie of a grand adventure, and for a while you're that other person on those great things happening. And it helps you escape the what may be the boredom of your everyday life, or also from a meditative point of view, the burden of having the sense of a personal ego and a personal identity that constrains your consciousness or your awareness, that for a while, if you can forget that you're yourself that's supposed to be a certain way and you can be someone else on this grand adventure, you're free of that sense of burden that you carry with you like an elephant on your back all day long. So people go places because there's different classes or things that are offered that are entertaining and appeal to what they want to find. And there may be take-home things too, like books or study courses or stuff that you can enjoy at home as well as in the group setting. And there's more and more of these things showing up all the time to pick from, but and sometimes you just want to hang out with friends and have a good time. And that's one thing that happens in organizations, and there's nothing wrong with having a good time. And the most simple version of that is like clubs. Like a club exists for the mutual benefit of members. Like if you like hiking, you may join a hiking club. If you like making model airplanes, you may join a model airplane club. So when you have shared interests, you get together with people that share the interests in common with you, and you share pointers and ideas and tips, and you see what the expert people do in that club, and you have a good time, and you make connections with people that like the same things you do. So you might be into hiking or environmental concerns, so you join the Sierra Club, or saving money, so you join a buying club, and you get things at screened at a good discount. Or a book club where you just meet with people and you discuss books that you're reading, and you have that as a way of connecting. And this could be the latest bestseller, or this could be the Ocean of Theosophy by Judge. It could be any book. You're getting together with the people because you just like being with them and studying the book. Or on internet sites like meetup.com, there can be literally thousands of clubs doing all sorts of things that you might want to do in any city that you might be living in, and you can search on them by keywords and find things to join. Another model is something like the Browning Society. So with that, we'd say, oh, there's Browning. He was a great person once. He's dead now. He produced a treasury of creative output. And now we have a society that preserves and faithfully shares for future generations his legacy. And the language may get out of date, but there's something special found in his words. And over time, if the inspiration falls into popular disuse, the society becomes more like a museum exhibit. When people are really enthusiastic about it, it's more of a stimulating thing. But the basic idea is that we can follow and benefit from the content of this former person as well. So that's another model of organizations that you see appearing. So if you want to understand, you go picture yourself back in Browning's time and what was going on there, and picture that context. And there may be societies meeting with conventions and stuff, and special archives in libraries to preserve materials before they fall into disuse and are lost. Now, another thing that's a more general thing that goes way back before the Theosophical movement, or religions as we know them, back to the beginning of time almost, is the art of storytelling, where storytellers taught and brought people together before other forms of knowledge existed. And the stories played a role in one's life from childhood through adulthood to the grave. And we all have stories that we tell ourselves about what our life is comprised of, and what our purpose in life is, and what our meaning is. And the great stories we find so moving. Like if you see like a story in a movie that really appeals to you, you want to see that movie every year or two, because you want to be taken along for the ride, even though you know what's going to happen, because it's like a great archetypal thing that you're going through. And kind of the underlying deepest patterns of life follow certain great stories that have been laid out that we keep living over and over again in our own individual ways. And the early storyteller could be an educator, a priest, trainer, scientist, guru, doctor, psychologist, and more, everything to one before we had these specialties. So we might sit around campfires and tell stories improvised. And as young people, we get excited about learning as we hear stories. And whether there's written literature or not, people will gather around and hear stories. And They help us understand how to live our life rightly in the world and how the world is comprised, and they form kind of our culture and our backdrop. And they also tell us of other societies, other places in the world, things that are dramatically different than ours. And they can be a form of spiritual training where we're told stories of great gurus of the past, or stories of how someone attained enlightenment, or stories that inspire us. But we have to distinguish between going from stories to true believers, because a true believer takes a story and doesn't separate themselves from, here's something that I'm thinking or I'm considering. The true believer says, this is the absolute truth, and I'm not questioning that, and everything is built on that. And an organization that takes that stand, they're given a creed and dogma, and they have to believe it, and there's no differing beliefs allowed. And non-believers are inferior, they're fallen, they haven't seen the light yet, they're enemies of the good, and they should be pitied. And one's faith in the creed is everything, and even if one doesn't understand it all, one day we will, and for now we must not let our faith waver and have a crisis of faith. And that can get carried away to say that life is a mystery, you'll never know it, that we're all lowly creatures, we must accept, open to our Creator and become faithful puppets, and that life's reward is based on a profession of belief and rather than good deeds, because in the end sins are forgiven, but the good deeds don't count. So that is yet another model, and we have to consider all these different aspects of things that are going around us. So if something is written in an ancient manuscript, it could be written 3,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago or in 1888, any year. It must be true because it's an ancient thing that everyone studies. Or we take the words because we're taught that they're divinely inspired, and so we should not question them. And so that becomes a part of the belief. And there may be things associated with us that are intended to scare us, like if we don't believe there's some afterlife punishment, like we will go to hell, or reward, like we will be resurrected, or that if you don't have the right beliefs, you're not going to make it in past the pearly gates or into the next realm or into the heaven worlds, or that you will have a good devachan or whatever, that you... another thing to consider that isn't quite organizational patterns is that there a lot of the things we use for studying, like deeper mysteries to life, are based on symbols. And we have symbols like the triangle, the square, the circle, and the Platonic solids that could be thought out without any computers or mathematics or anything really. You could model them with your hands. And those symbols have been really explored deeply as far as what they can mean and what they can show. But now there's been advancements in science that allow us to mathematically see the existence of new things that are wonderful symbols that add sort of a further degree of insight into life. And one whole area that we don't have time to really go into is like with fractals and chaos theory and things like the Mandelbrot set and the bifurcation curve and the strange attractors and all that side of things, which are a whole rich set of symbols full of meaning. But all the symbols could find a useful place in our mind as connections to the ancient wisdom tradition. So here's one of the new ones, the Mandelbrot set, and I won't go into describing how you consider it, but it basically gives you a graphical picture to explore with a computer that shows the nature of what can exist versus what can't exist. Now, I'm not going to explain that now, but it's like a picture of existence. And the bifurcation curve is another symbol, and it shows the progress from non-existence to being, to cyclic existence, to the onset of chaos, all taking a living system and increasing the energy level gradually, and then you see as you increase the energy level, it goes through one state after the other. And we have the regular Platonic solids, but this comes to one other thing that I got to open a web browser to show. 2 dimensions, you have an infinite number of Platonic solids basically because you can have an infinite number of equal length lines that can connect to each other and form like a 2-dimensional solid. In 3 dimensions, you have 5 Platonic solids, which is 5 regular polyhedra you can form. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the interesting point comes to 4 dimensions, because in 4 dimensions there are 6, not 5 Platonic solids. There's 1 new Platonic solid. And after 4 dimensions, there's only 3 Platonic solids for dimension 5 all the way up to infinity. It stops, 4 dimensions is the interesting point. And so understanding what that 6th Platonic solid might mean would make an interesting symbol to figure out. Those are pictures of the we're almost there. Okay, this is that 6th Platonic solid, the one that only exists in 4 dimensions. And I wasn't able to get this moving graphic into my PowerPoint. But what is significant about 4 dimensions and what is significant about this one as a 6th is something that's worth thinking about. And it just goes to help illustrate how there's things that you can find in mathematics and in modern science that provide us with additional symbols to consider. So then we come to discovering reality. So you could say reality is what's really there. Maya is misperception. Maya isn't an illusion. It's just seeing something wrong. Like you see a stick in the road and you think it's a snake, but it's really just a stick. And what's real from one point of view might not seem real from another point of view. Like your sense of time can change depending on how fast you're moving. If you're moving near the speed of light, a few seconds to you might be the entire lifetime of the universe. That your sense of time changes with motion and the scale. And you also see that like in the dream state where a few seconds of waking time might be hours of activity in a dream, but the sense of time on other states of consciousness or realms of existence could vary too. And there's a lot of things where you have a unique perspective of time and space and relationship to things that's for you that's different with other people. So, so the question is, how do you bring someone to reality or teach them to open up if they aren't necessarily going to see exactly what you will see? So first you have to do a reality check for yourself. You have to kind of be grounded to externally what's there. And it doesn't necessarily mean when you see reality that there's a gritty side to life and you suddenly see it's dog eat dog and everything is awful. No, it's that reality isn't equal to someone else's worst nightmare of the way the world is. And we make our own imaginary reality sometimes. We just stand ourselves in a corner and in our minds picture the world being a certain way, but maybe we don't get out and look enough. Maybe we're still hiding in Plato's cave and need to get out in the real world. And computers just give us another way to go even further disconnected if we get too caught up into them. We can have yet another, even more artificial world to be off in. Okay, humor time. Okay, an aspirant. A sponge ready to uncritically soak up one's every stray thought. I mean, they're a great aspirant. They get everything I say. Or a heretic, someone who offers an original idea at a theosophical meeting. Oh my, we never say that. Get out of here. or a Dengpa, a faithful member of a rival Theosophical group. We don't hear that very often, but a long time ago, that was perhaps going around more than it should have. So for reality, you don't necessarily have to fly off to another plane to find reality. It can be here and now. In fact, Pruker speaks like of the states of awareness, like the nirvanic or the devachanic or the kamalokic or avicik, and all of those you could attain that state of consciousness even if you were physically embodied. It's not necessarily the plane that you exist on that gives you the certain state of consciousness. It's what you attune to. Although you'd be more completely in a higher state of consciousness in a higher plane, perhaps. You don't have to go there to achieve that. And there's other realities, like our social reality can get super complicated of all these different things going on, trying to live a life in the world. And there's an underlying mathematical reality behind things that we don't always sense. Okay, then one other, nearing the end type, as far as models go, another type of way of looking at things is the idea of skepticism, but not in a negative sense. That not meaning scoffing or denying or mocking things of value, but seeking true value, and by providing what you could consider a healthy separation between being self-aware and holding beliefs, to save yourself from becoming a true believer and a fanatic, but still saying, these are the things that I like thinking about and that I am considering and I go along with, but it's me going along with them. It's not saying, this is real, and not having any question about it and not even thinking that you're thinking it. In one case, you're using the mind to have an idea. In the other case, you're possessed by the mind, and the mind is saying something and you're not aware that it's taking control. Skepticism allows for an open mind and consideration of others' viewpoints because you can consider them all interesting and you don't have one side with a compelling need to defend it at all costs against attack from competing views. And it can cultivate a mind full of wonder and an eagerness to move into new things, which I would say is a prerequisite to future growth and eventual initiation. Whereas the inquiring mind would die if it's held in place too rigidly too long. It would just sort of suffocate or starve to death for lack of input. So this is one of the negative impressions people have of skepticism. That it's not just a tool to tear down people that disagree with you. But it is good to wonder about things when people get carried away about the world is ending next Sunday because they read a quote somewhere that says that they interpret says it's going to end, or who knows what. And being happy because you believe something isn't the only way of being happy, because you could be happy in believing that the world's a good place, hiding in your basement while like your own government is bombing your neighborhood, like say some neighborhood in Syria or something. And just because you're feeling happy and you believe that you'll be safe doesn't protect you from the bombs. You should still know what's going on in the world. And the happiness that comes from not knowing about what's really happening is not a safe sort of happiness. Happiness, there's many ways of being happy. So this has a secular creed, but it's really, a lot of it is, well, some of it is the benefits of being skeptical, that you go on what you see and you understand, and you're not taking something from someone else where they, and accepting it as a complete package, but you remain open, and you follow the Buddhist idea of like original mind, that you think things through from scratch each time you consider them, and not learn to say something, to parrot something so fast that you don't even think about it anymore. The words just roll off your mouth, and before you know it, you've talked for 10 minutes, and you might not even remember the original inspiration that came behind those ideas that form the words. You've been saying it so many times that when that happens, you have a dead creed. You don't have living ideas anymore. So the first person to be skeptical is yourself, your own mind. That you shouldn't believe everything you think. Just because your mind tells you something doesn't mean it's true. But you can't do that if you consider it's me thinking these things and I am these words that are going through the narrative of the mind. you need that breathing space, a little gap between your higher principles and the part of Manas that wants to run away. Okay, so one of the things that you see in groups in general and in the spiritual path is unity, because you gain something by feeling part of a greater wholeness, and there's different levels of doing that in family, nation, religion, culture, and the connections are made by living karmic connection with other beings, not because of a membership card. And the connections are what draw us back into the will of birth and rebirth, and to meet people from lifetime after lifetime, and to be drawn into certain causes, or to never see or know or be aware of other things at all because you just never connected to them. And even personal compassion for people brings you back in the world to live out that connectedness, that you need a here to there connectedness where there's no difference, where the in-between space opens up a channel where the energy can go, where something inside you becomes something inside another. So people do this from all walks of life, that they can connect to each other. And you could imagine connecting to higher things to the world because of your own inner growth. And there are all sorts of traditions that teach connectedness and try to tie them together. Although the way that picture is drawn looks kind of dark and ominous. And the connection is very personal. You, right there before me, right now, like the Dalai Lama might do, give his complete awareness to the one person he's talking to at that moment. And it doesn't matter what your belief or background is in life for being able to connect to people. It may affect your ability to understand life, but it doesn't block you from connecting. Okay, humor time. I was running out of bad jokes, so these are my last two. Okay, truth, an accurate representation of one's opinions, and selfishness, being unable to give another everything that person wants with nothing in return. So you're selfish. Okay, so every creature, great or small, deserves our compassion, deserves connectedness, and when they cross us in life, we need to do something. We either decide to bring them into our lives or we don't, but if we bring them in, we are responsible for the connection. There's a unity of thought that transcends languages. There's a way of connecting at an idea level. But when we lose our sense of connectedness, then we start harming others and we have warfare and negative things. When we stop realizing that others are people too. And the highest unity is heterogeneous unity, where we celebrate everyone's differences, not where we try to make everyone the same as us. Okay, and one of the last types of things is for connecting or for good models of ways of doing things in the world that has to do with art and self-expression. That art provides a physical embodiment to otherwise unseen realities. It gives song, dance, shape, color, and story to other people, times, and worlds. And it becomes a talisman that lets the enjoyer of the art soar inwardly into adventures outside their day-to-day life. The artist grows to embrace greater visions that as one tries to give concrete form to expressing them. Like a great tale of heroism brings the heroic to life in the writer and the reader, or a heart-touching song opens the hearts of the composer, singer, and audience. And it's in the making of the art that opens you up. It's not, you don't judge it based on other people's art. It's the process that's important. And you're never too old to do art. And by doing art, by expressing ourselves in the world, we are actually creating ourselves. We are those things that we do and we bring out in the world. That's what we know ourselves as. That's what the world knows us as. That's how the world connects to us. So we have to ask the big questions, and no question is too simple and none is too hard. And no one else's answer is good for your question. And it isn't answered by deferring it or putting it off a level. Like someone says, why live on Earth? So we can have a better afterlife. That just puts it off and says, why live in the afterlife? So we can have a better afterlife. Why live in a better afterlife? It's just putting it off one level after the next. It still isn't answering why live here, there, or anywhere. And can things be explained as happening for a purpose? If they happen for a purpose, that means another being wanted them to with a particular purpose in mind. But some answers to the questions give a theory of how things work, but they're not helpful in your life. Other answers give an insight into the causes in motion in your life and how you can, with free will, change them. And those are the useful answers. Not descriptive, but things that tie into what's going on. So there's basic questions we ask about everything that sets the context for it and how it fits in our life. And different approaches give you predetermined answers, but you really need to think through your own answers. You can't, unless you're going to be a true believer and pick a brand, you're not going to have a finished package of beliefs to follow. And the act of answering the questions themselves is, in one sense, living your life. So it's not like you're taking a quiz and if you get 16 or more, you pass. It's more like answering the question is passing. And then, where should I go? What should I do? And why worry? Is life really a big puzzle? That's just an analogy. Does that analogy apply as, is it a puzzle? Okay, so we need to find answers. So what's the key to the happy life? One that can be looked back on with satisfaction. Is there urgency? Is time running out like a storm about to break? Or is there an eternity of time like a lazily flowing river? You hear both descriptions. Can you do everything? Are you wrong in living out some things in life and ignoring others? And what percentage of your life must be given away to charity or service, and what to yourself? And here's a question I would give a definite answer to, but people may have different answers to. Is artistic expression selfish or another form of service? Again, you have to answer it yourself. So at this age, there's no question about how to be happy with life. You don't need any answers. Life is the answer. And it involves a close tie to loved ones. And you completely trust the others, and you are blissfully happy, and everything is right with the world. But then life beckons and calls you out into the world, and you may get bloody knees, and you may have problems, and you may try to eat some mud and get sick, and you know, things happen as you grow up. But life is about exploring life, you can see. And life takes on a perspective as you step back a little bit. Like, that arrow's pointing to a picture of the Earth as seen from Saturn. And there's a little dot slightly to the left of it that's our moon, although there's not an arrow next to it. That is like 4 lengths of the arrow over. So the first step is self-knowledge, to free yourself from the whirlwind of busyness and to reflect on things, to separate yourself from the noise of the mind, the busy rush of activities, and say, what's going on here? What patterns are working? And dreaming big dreams is important, that you have to visualize things that go beyond the mundane everyday life, or you will never rise beyond it. And when you do so, it can you can bring great visions into reality to share with others. So I'll make 1 or 2 last comments, but at this point, well, go back one. If anyone wants to make any comments at this point, and then I'll give 2 or 3 summation points. These are all just models, things that are going on in theosophical groups and life all around us. And we have to be self-aware. We have to see how it's going, how it fits in our lives, how we can make a contribution. I guess I'm putting everyone to sleep or something. Or everyone has mental indigestion. I've just dumped too much content into a channel, not wide enough for it all at once. Okay, I'll go to my final comments. Okay, how do we put this together? Okay, let these ideas settle in the mind. Be more observant when involved in groups and interacting with people. Try not to confuse your mental narrator, who is like the person narrating the story of your life as it's happening, and tries to describe it in words of what is actually happening. Acknowledge that each person has their own sense of time, space, and importance to experiences. And use the mind rather than being possessed by it, but keeping a degree of skepticism and maintaining beginner's mind, thinking things through freshly each time. By trying? Okay, final comment. So I thought I'd give all this raw material and people can take what is useful out of it. I was going to start off with a list of theosophical organizations and describe patterns with them, but I thought it would be more helpful just to give the raw information and let people kind of sort out their own thinking and decide what they want to with it. So that's what I ended up doing.